It's been 30 years since the Tour de France last started in Germany, and as atmospheric backdrops go, it's hard to compete with the Berlin Wall and a couple of rolls of Kodak Triax. Still, Dusseldorf does all right with its fashion industry and its Frank Gehry buildings. It's a picture of post-reunification prosperity, and it hosts the Tour in the midst of a resurgence in German cycling. The cycling nation all others are surging after, though, remains Great Britain. The British contingent in this year's Tour is led by Sky's Chris Froome, who's going for his third win in a row and fourth overall. He's backed up by the Welsh pair of Geraint Thomas and Luke Rowe. Mark Cavendish has barely raced since a glandular fever diagnosis in April. He's back in pursuit of the all-time stage wins record. Steve Cummings' participation was in doubt too after injury, but he was fit enough to win both the British National Time Trial and Road Race titles last weekend. Scott Thwaites makes his Tour debut to give dimension day to three British riders, and there are three elsewhere. Simon Yates rides alongside Esteban Chavez as the joint GC hope for Orica Scott. Fortuneo Oscaro's Dan McClay returns after his debut last year, and Ben Swift starts for the first time since 2011 for his new squad, UAE Team Emirates. Interviews with all nine can be found on the website. Now, the Dusseldorf start means this year's route covers 4 countries in the first 3 days, taking in Belgium and Luxembourg on the way into France, then tackles all 5 major French mountain ranges for the first time in 25 years, although the number of mountaintop finishes is down for reasons we'll get onto. The race for overall victory is bookended by time trials, today's 14 kilometres and another 22.5 in Marseille on the final Saturday, before the usual ceremonial finish in Paris. 3,540 kilometres in total, and for the first time all 3,540 will be televised, plus a few extra for the rollout in the morning. Every stage of the 2017 Tour is live on ITV4 from start to finish, and of course that means a bigger, better selection of raw material from which to build the nightly highlights. Hello, we're in the hometown of Kraftwerk and Wim Wenders for the start of the 2017 Tour de France, so the omens are good for both sound and vision over the next 3 weeks. Now, we saw some of Sky's Tour highlights in that music montage, and you could easily fill a whole show with them. They've won 4 out of the last 5 races as a team, and Chris Froome 3 out of 4 as an individual, including the last 2. And as he looks to extend that streak, he arrives for the Tour as usual at the head of the strongest squad that money and sports science can assemble. But there is a difference, or at least a difference in public perception, between last year's Sky and this year's, and the reason is what emerged during the off-season. First came Bradley Wiggins' leaked TUE's medical exemptions that had allowed him to take corticosteroids for the allergies that seemed to coincide with key points in the season, including the season he won the Tour. Then, while he and Sky were still fending off the follow-up questions, a bigger one was raised. What was in a package hand-delivered from Manchester to the team doctor Richard Freeman at the 2011 Dauphiné in France, which Wiggins had won? For 2 months there was no answer, until team boss Dave Brailsford was summoned before a parliamentary select committee.
Well, Dr. Freeman told me that it was Flumicil. That was in the package, a product which is for a nebuliser, and that was what was in this package.
So, a routine decongestant, except that the promised paperwork to prove it didn't exist. Neither did Brad Wiggins' medical records. Instead of being stored centrally as required, they'd been kept on Dr. Freeman's laptop, which had been stolen. Dr. Freeman wasn't available either, too sick to appear before the committee. Simon Cope, who'd carried the package out to France despite working for British Cycling rather than Sky, was left to carry the can.
It's a normal and natural question to ask what is in a medical package that you're transporting across international boundaries by plane.
I didn't ask.
UK anti-doping did. They launched an investigation that's still going on. And the affair has raised its own questions about the relationship between a commercial team and publicly funded British cycling. Not to mention questions about relationships within the team. In March, 16 Sky riders tweeted their support for Dave Brailsford in a show of solidarity that was undermined by the fact that Chris Froome wasn't one of them. He's since offered a sort of business-like endorsement of the boss, and this week is understandably more focused on defending his Tour title and the actions of his team. Although, of course, one might end up affecting the other. Daniel Friebe spoke to him and to Dave Brailsford.
Dave, it's been a tough few months for the team. People have called it Sky's winter of discontent. Have these been the hardest few months of your professional career?
No, I mean, we've had a lot of certainly challenging moments along the way, but I think it's been a tricky couple of months, but all in all, I think I'm very content, and I'm confident that we're doing everything the right way. We always have. And so I have that, and I know that, and that gives me a confidence and a belief in everything that we're doing and the organisation and the way we do things. So in that sense, no.
And throughout it all, there's been a lot of scrutiny of Chris Froome's results. He hasn't won a race this year. Are you satisfied that he is where he should be as we enter this Tour de France?
Yeah, I think it's it's one of the first times that he hasn't had a victory under his belt before he got here. But I think what he's got more experience. And I think he's in good shape.
For me personally, I feel as if I'm ready for the next 3 weeks ahead. I've had a much slower start to the year this year. I've come into this point of the season with a lot less race days than I've had previously, so I feel fresher. I can take a lot of confidence knowing that I'm ready for this.
Just to be clear, no TUEs on this Tour de France for you?
No.
People will be curious to know, I mean, what do you take that is legal, that is part of your recovery protocol? Because that's obviously become more and more important now that you guys can't use needles.
Protein drink. Protein drinks. You just focus on nutrition.
And recovery is going to be important on this Tour de France.
Yeah.
A very difficult route, but it's a route that you've said doesn't particularly suit you. What do you mean by that?
It's a route that's certainly very open. There are very few mountaintop finishes, much fewer than in the past. So there are less opportunities for the main GC contenders to really fight it out in the mountains. There are the fewest time trial kilometres I think the Tour de France has ever seen in the history of the Tour de France. So having said that, I think it leaves people looking at the rest of the race thinking, well, where else are we going to make this time? And it means that we could see a much more aggressive race in other parts.
Well, Chris Froome starts this Tour as favourite on the strength of past performance rather than this season's. Richie Porte is the rider in form. The question is whether he can hold the form and avoid trouble for a full 3 weeks. Nairo Quintana has a 3-week race in his legs already, having ridden and finished second in the Giro. Alberto Contador is at 14-1 with Fabio Aru, who was supposed to ride the Giro but missed out because of injury. His Astana teammate and co-leader Jakob Fuglsang is at 20-1 with Quintana's teammate Alejandro Valverde and last year's second-place rider Romain Bardet. Orica Scott have a twin threat too. Esteban Chavez's preparation for his first Tour de France ride has been interrupted by injury. He has Simon Yates alongside him. The Tour gets underway with a 14-kilometre time trial around the streets of Dusseldorf, one street mainly. It does feature a few turns in the middle, but there's a 4-kilometre straight to start along the banks of the Rhine, and that doubles as a 4-kilometre home stretch. It could have been designed to put Germany's world time trial champion Tony Martin into the yellow jersey on the opening day, and probably was. Ned Boulting caught up with him at the team presentation on Thursday.
Yeah, it's for sure one of the biggest opportunities, one of the biggest highlights in my career. And I'm really proud to be part of this amazing atmosphere here and to feel it really live. The chance is incredibly big for me. It's a one-time chance in my life, and I hope I can do it there.
You're the world champion again, you're the national champion again. The weight of expectation in this country will be immense. But you've worn the yellow jersey before, you've been there.
Yeah, and I learned to handle all the pressure from the fans, from the media in the past. So I know how it feels when all the pressure's on your shoulders. I try to turn it into something really positive that gives me a lot of strength and power, and I have a good feeling for Saturday.
Saturday itself had less of a good feeling about it, misty and wet and consequently requiring care going round corners. Lotto NL Jumbo's Dylan Groenewegen got up and finished, but unsurprisingly didn't post one of the better early times. Neither did his teammate George Bennett, who had a similar fall at a different corner. Chris Froome decided to play it safe and presented a note from his mum saying he could do the course by car. Note, Froome was out early following Michał Kwiatkowski and getting a feel for the course at full speed. Froome, as defending champion, of course, being the last rider off. His teammates were setting good target times for him too. Kwiatkowski was third fastest when he finished, behind Vasil Kirienka. Then, almost completely ignored by the cameras until the home straight, Geraint Thomas went 7 seconds faster than Kirienka. So it's Sky currently first and second with all the main contenders still to go. We join commentary with Richie Porte in the start house.
5 seconds to go for Richie Porte. Let's just watch him off and up and running on the Tour de France. What a Voyager discovery this is going to be for Richie Porte. One, many people's favourite to win the overall victory in Paris in 3 weeks' time. Brilliant time trialist in his own right. 14 kilometres to show the rest of the peloton what he's all about. Will he attack this race? Will he ride conservatively? He can't afford to be too conservative. He's going to have to attack, and he just wants to get round without losing seconds. And most significantly, as we've seen with other riders in these conditions, without losing any skin. This is a big next quarter of an hour or so for Richie Porte as he embarks on this defining Tour de France in his developing career. What a season Alejandro Valverde has had so far. Started off absolutely blisteringly, attacked the Ardennes Classics and came back with his hat full of victories once again. Perhaps arguably one of the best seasons he's ever ridden in the twilight of his career, but Valverde is out and running. Jos van Emden, I should say, the Dutch time trialist, is out on the road. Now, he went through the Czech time, 8 seconds down on the time of Vasil Kirienka and Michał Kwiatkowski. But the really interesting thing from the checkpoint times that we've just worked out, David, is that Geraint Thomas was actually 3 seconds slower than Kirienka and then made up 7 seconds, so he rode a negative split.
Yeah, which I think on a course like today, with the conditions we've seen, with the headwind and Van Emden, who's coming in going fast, and you see, this is what they've been doing. The negative split seems to be working. Yeah,
Jos van Emden, this is a very, very competitive time indeed. The clock has stopped. There it is, ticking over. Geraint Thomas's time is safe for the time being, but Jos van Emden might well be inside or thereabouts the time of Vasil Kirienka and Matteo Trentin. And Jos van Emden is a pure time trialist, and that is a very good ride from him, but it's not going to dent the time of Geraint Thomas, who continues to be in the hot seat. 16:04 Geraint Thomas's time, 15 seconds slower than him, Jos van Emden. Geraint Thomas leads stage 1. Plenty of big names though still to finish. Sylvain Chavanel with the tricolour armbands to denote the former French time trial champion status from Direct Énergie, the team where he started his career, which he rejoined last year. He has down the start ramp, and after him, well, it's just a very, very select group of riders. Next up will be Primož Roglic on the start ramp. Still to come, though, Michael Matthews, Tony Martin, of course, Steve Cummings, Luke Durbridge, Stefan Kung, many people's outsiders tip, Pierre Latour, and the small matter of Contador, Quintana, Aru, and last of all, Chris Froome. But the point of the matter is, at this point in the race, David Miller, Geraint Thomas leads stage 1 provisionally on a time of 16:04, and that is fully 7 seconds faster than Vasil Kirienka. And we didn't see much of him, but Geraint Thomas, well, how long is that time going to last, and could it hold all the way?
Oh, it's potential that it can hold. I mean, it's a great time. There's a significant gap, 7 seconds to second place, and the fact that it was a negative split, so he took 10 seconds out in those last 6Ks, which goes to show that if you ride this cleverly, you can, and with a good pacing, which he's obviously done, you can actually make a big difference in a small space of time. Oh! Valverde, is it?
That's Alejandro Valverde, who is down.
Big crash, big crash.
Exactly the same corner, I think, once again. And let's have a look what happens here.
Yeah, he knew he was going too fast. You can see, oh, wow, he's really smashed into that. Hopefully he's okay.
Oh,
no, I think he's taking a big hit there. No, he's not. He knows. Yeah, he's shaking his head. Oh, no.
Well, there we go. If you ever needed an illustration of the potential hazards on this 14-kilometre time trial, that is it. That looks for all the world like Alejandro Valverde's Tour de France is over in the rain in Germany, just a few kilometres into his Tour de France. And that's bitter, both for him in one of the best years of his fantastic career, And a lot of people will be very, very sorry to see the end of his tour.
So his nose go a bit fast. He knows it, so he tries brakes a little bit, does back wheel slides, and then front wheel just goes. Nothing you can do. Just touches the brakes, and he takes a massive impact into that fence.
Right, Richie Porte, just to give you an indication of how he's going, he's got 4 kilometres still to race. He went through 8K and the checkpoint, 22 seconds down on the time of Michał Kwiatkowski, which puts him, well, actually, I mean, staggeringly, at the moment, it puts him 2 seconds slower at that point than Simon Yates. And you mustn't forget, Simon Yates' time trial was absolutely extraordinary. Now, I've kind of looked at the names, the GC names who have come over the finish line so far. Geraint Thomas is clearly a GC name, maybe in a plan B kind of way as we go into the start house and look at Andre Greipel. Geraint Thomas leads the field at 16.04, but of the other GC riders, Simon Yates is the best at the moment at 16.41, better than Emmanuel Buchmann, better than Damiano Caruso, better than Thibaut Pinot, and better than Romain Bardet. And potentially, unless Richie Porte hauls back a bit of time, faster than Richie Porte. Big breath, big moment, big rider. Tony Martin, the 4-time world time trial champion, one of the most popular riders in the peloton and amongst the cycling public, with the weight of a nation on his shoulders and the rainbow bands around his midriff, out on 14 kilometres of potentially career-defining racing on the Tour de France, the race he loves more than any other. Tony Martin in front of home crowds at last in the biggest race in the calendar, and the heavy favourites in the pouring rain to take Stage 1 and the yellow jersey with it. Certainly it is designed with Tony Martin in mind, you would imagine, this particular parcours, and of course no one would begrudge the city of Dusseldorf thinking about their homegrown champion. It is a Martin course, but is he in Tony Martin form? The answer is, on the evidence of this season, probably not totally the all-conquering Tony Martin that we know.
I mean, it's probably his last chance to wear yellow and only chance ever to wear yellow in Germany. So this is, as you said, a massive day for him.
Well, one big German favourite in Tony Martin gives way just a minute later to another. Different kind of rider, of course, but Marcel Kittel is another German who knows what it's like to wear the yellow jersey on the Tour de France. And he is, on form, probably the fastest sprinter in the Tour de France. And here's a man who is thinking about the yellow jersey in Paris, Richie Porte. You can see how much effort he's putting into this time trial on this long, flat, straight run into the finish line. He can hold nothing back at this point. The really dangerous twists and turns in the road are behind him. He just needs to negotiate this long, sweeping left-hander. His time, well, it's not going to be anything like the time of Geraint Thomas. And in fact, it's only going to be slightly faster, if it's faster at all, than the time of Simon Yates. Yates' time, let's not forget, 16.41. And Richie Porte, I think, is going to be even slower than that, which indicates that the conditions are still atrocious and that Richie Porte, who is the better time trialist on form than Simon Yates by some distance, has opted for caution first. And he sets a really important benchmark time of 16.51 that all the other big favourites will be looking at. That is the same time as Damiano Caruso and only 4 seconds faster than Romain Bardet. Now, Steve Cummings is down the ramp. What is he going to do? The word from the camp is that he will ride conservatively. He doesn't really like riding in these conditions, but who knows how he's going to go, and who knows how Tony Martin is going to fare in the rain here. He's up and running, so too is Cummings. We need to take another short break. In the start house, Stefan Küng, the newly crowned Swiss time trial champion, and what a jersey that is to wear. No Fabian Cancellara anymore, but the heir apparent is on the road. Stefan Küng, identified absolutely as the principal rival for Tony Martin over this time trial, is about to find out whether he has it in his compass to wear the yellow jersey on the Tour de France. What about this man, though? Our first real glimpse of him, Primož Roglič, the converted ski jumper who burst onto the scene, much to people's surprise last year. A virtual unknown before he swept to victory in the individual time trial in the middle of the Giro d'Italia in foul, wet weather conditions on that occasion, and has since gone on to reinforce his status as a GC rider of the future and a major time trialist.
Richie, I suppose on a day like today, any finish is a good finish, is that right?
Exactly. Keep it rubber side down was probably more the goal. I followed Nicolas Roche just before the start and in the car, and he binned it, so I was a little bit petrified, to be honest. It was such a slippery course, and you know, I'd have liked to have done a little bit quicker time, but I think the main thing is to have kept all the skin intact today.
The big names continue to line up on the start ramp. Alberto Contador. Is he fading? Has he faded? Can Alberto Contador still compete at the very highest level and the biggest race of all once again, even after all these years? Well, if intent were everything, and attitude were everything, you might as well give the yellow jersey to him in Paris. But that's only half the story. Have the years caught up with Alberto Contador? 14 kilometres will tell a story. Maybe not the whole picture, but we'll get an inkling of how he is going. Alberto Contador, these days wearing the white of Trek Segafredo, is the last but 3 riders to go out on the course of stage 1 here in Dusseldorf.
One of the things that will be happening as well, that everyone will be hearing that Valverde crashed. And that will be making Taylor Phinney coming across now. It's a good time. Well, let's see how far he is from the line. Can't quite tell yet with these fixed cameras, but this is first ever Tour de France Taylor Phinney, and it's a fast time.
It's a very fast time.
Still got 300 metres, 400 metres to go.
Well, the clock stopped rather frustratingly. Let's have a look, but the indications are that Taylor Phinney is flying, and this is something that a lot of people will be delighted to see. Taylor Phinney, a couple of years ago, thought his career was over. He was told he would never be able to run, possibly even walk again, after smashing his left leg to bits in a horrible crash. And now, a former time trialist of the very, very highest order, clawing his way back into form. It's a good time. He'll take great heart from that, and so too will the American sporting public. Taylor Phinney, from an illustrious line of American races. His father was the first ever American Tour de France stage winner, and he is back to something like his best, and that is extremely good to see. Well, you never know what this man is thinking. Nairo Quintana raced the Giro d'Italia just a couple of months ago in May, finished second to Tom Dumoulin.
That was a close call on the ramp there. He almost went down with the slip. So that's Movistar having a terrible day so far. He'll know that Valverde is out the race. Well, you'd imagine so, because often you see or you just hear the whispers, because whether they've actually told him or not, I don't know. Now, we haven't seen...
Yeah, well, Tony Martin has actually gone through the checkpoint in pole position, which is ominous for everybody. He's gone faster, finally faster than that pairing from Team Sky of Kwiatkowski and Kirienka. Sylvain Chavanel, meanwhile, is the next rider to post his time at the finish line. It's not going to be top 10 or even close to that, but all the rest of the race will be looking at that split time of Tony Martin and go, Tony's on form today, and that might be bad news for Geraint Thomas.
That will have been a strategy as well, to get through to that time check, limit his losses, and then really unleash on this final 4 or 5Ks where that's pure Tony Martin terrain. Dead straight, dead flat, not technical.
So here he is, rider number 1, the 3-time Tour de France winner, Chris Froome, hunting down an extraordinary 4th Tour de France victory, which really would elevate him into one of the all-time greats on this long, long and glorious race. His teammate, Geraint Thomas, will be watching on anxiously as Tony Martin threatens his best time, and Chris Froome could also end up denying Geraint Thomas victory in stage 1, but either way, this is an important 14 kilometres for Chris Froome. First and foremost, get through it safely. He knows what will have happened to Alejandro Valverde, whose Tour de France looks like it's over. And Chris Froome has also seen his big rival, arch rival and old teammate mucker Richie Porte ride very, very conservatively. Richie Porte coming over the line in 16 minutes and 51 seconds. Some 45 seconds slower than Geraint Thomas, and I think Chris Froome might have thought about that and wondered whether he can hurt Richie Porte at the first possible opportunity here, David.
Oh, if there's one thing we know about Chris Froome, and we learned more than ever at last year's Tour de France, is that he is a pure racer, and there's no way he'll be able to hold himself back or ride cautiously today. He'll be riding out like this is just a one-day race, I'm sure of it, and I think I'd be surprised. He already looks fast, and when you look fast, it generally means you're going very fast. And so I actually think that it could be Chris Froome, Tony Martin battling it out, in which case that will just send the fear up everybody.
Tony Martin were told to take off that World Champions kit for whatever reason. He could always ride in the German National Champions kit. He sealed that honour for the, I think, 7th time in his career just last weekend, but only just, David. 48-kilometre time trial, and he only edged out Jascha Sütterlin from Movistar by 8 seconds at the end. But clearly, this was his target, and not necessarily that.
It's going to be close. It's going to be very close because 16:04, Cade goes 15. I don't know if he's going to do it. I mean, that's to average over 60 kilometers an hour to make it to beat Geraint Thomas. So it's going to come down right to the line.
Well, it's a straight line, save for the closing 200 or 300 metres where it kicks to the right and then gently sweeps to the left before he'll line himself up and stop the clock. Remember, Geraint Thomas is on the hot seat. The time to beat is 16:04.
So
and if that average speed there is to be believed, he's not going to make it.
No, 5 minutes going to be so close. On the line, 400 metres to go.
20 seconds. Thomas knows it. Drawing in the breath, Geraint Thomas. This is a big moment for both these riders. Who's going to prevail at the line? It looks like Tony Martin might just have enough seconds in hand. Willed on by the crowd here in Dusseldorf. They're cheering their hero on, but the clock might just be against him. Where is that finish line? 16:04, the target time. He's not going to make it. Geraint Thomas is going to hold on from Tony Martin, but the clock stops, but he hasn't reached the finish line yet. Now he does. 16:12, provisional third place. Geraint Thomas, well, he lives to fight another day. His teammate, Chris Froome, is still out on the road, but it's not worked out for Germany. It's not worked out for the world champion, and it is emphatically not worked out on this occasion for Tony Martin. Fact of the matter is, though, he might just have been beaten by a better man in Geraint Thomas. Chris Froome is still out on the road, but disappointment for Tony Martin. Well, there he is, Chris Froome, and that is some race there between Martin and Thomas. And if Thomas does hang on, this will be one of the defining days in his racing career, David.
Oh, it really will for any cyclist. So the yellow jersey is one of the most coveted prizes, and you know, sadly for him, there's a chance that the person who's going to beat him is this man we see on the screen now, his teammate Chris Froome, his team leader. But if Geraint Thomas can hold off Kirienka, former world champion, Tony Martin, reigning world champion, they're the two guys who he's beaten. And not only that, he did a negative split, and then he's put in, 11 seconds into Tony Martin in those final 5Ks, 6Ks.
Well, who could still dislodge Geraint Thomas? Probably not Nairo Quintana. Maybe Chris Froome. Perhaps Pierre Latour, the French national champion, who we haven't seen yet out on the road. Maybe Alberto Contador. We still await their split times, their check times, to see how they're going. How about Stefan Kung, the Swiss national time trial champion? We saw him off the start ramp. We don't know how he's faring either, so it's not over yet by a long stretch for Geraint Thomas.
No, it's not, and this is going to be the longest 10 minutes of his life, I think.
Well, I'm feeling the stress. Dread to think what it would be like for Geraint Thomas and the rest of them. Marcel Kittel, excellent time for him. He's absolutely flying. There's Thomas's time. He's not going to dent that, but that is an extraordinary ride from the big man from Erfurt in East Germany, and an indication that his legs are good. Marcel Kittel wanted that yellow jersey, and on another day he might have got it. That's a great ride.
Well, we mustn't forget that Marcel Kittel started his career as a time trial specialist. So, you know, he's showing that here on home roads. I mean, it's obviously given the added motivation that perhaps he's lacked of late. Well, he doesn't need to have the motivation considering he is the fastest, if one of the fastest, next to Mark Cavendish, sprinter in the world.
He was absolutely nowhere to be seen at the check times either, Marcel Kittel. So he must have made up a huge amount of time on the second half of the course in 7th place provisionally, 16 seconds down on Geraint Thomas's time. And the Welshman continues to head the field. And what a field it is. Wall-to-wall talent all the way down to Taylor Phinney in 10th place at the moment. Right, one of a sequence of dangerous corners. I'm wondering, is this Valverde corner?
No, that's coming off the bridge.
Another one. Yeah. They do look horribly dangerous. Coming up to the checkpoint though, and pretty soon we'll get an indication of how well Chris Froome is going. There's Stefan Kung, let's not forget about him. I can tell you that Fabio Aru went through the check time 25 seconds down on the time of Tony Martin, whose split time is the best of all, 9:19. Fabio Aru has gone through at 9:44. So Aru is through the checkpoint, and we've had that timing. The next man to post that time will be Stefan Kung, and we're awaiting that timing. Oh, he's had slightly gone wrong way around there. Difficult moment for Kung.
Be very interested to see if Chris Froome uses the same tactic as his normal tactic actually is. Stefan Küng has got the fastest, just 1 second off.
1 second slower.
1 second slower than Tony Martin. So at the first time, there it is. It's just third place.
So Stefan Küng has gone through in second place at the split point on exactly the same time as Kwiatkowski and Kirienka, just 1 second down on Tony Martin's. But don't forget, it's critical now, this big negative split that Geraint Thomas rode. He took so much time back on everyone in the second half, and Tony Martin wasn't able to replicate that.
And that might be Tony Martin's made a tactical error. Just let the emotions get the better of him and hit out too hard and paid a heavy price for it, because he lost 11 seconds to Geraint Thomas in the second half, which is an enormous amount at this level. And I'm interested to see what Chris Froome does, because Chris Froome almost always does negative splits. It's kind of his technique tactic, or should I say probably the team's, because I think it's Tim Kerrison that controls a lot of the pacing. And I think it's a tactic that's often worked for pure time trial specialists, is not to get carried away, remain rational, and then really hit out in the second half. Oh, slip from Nairo Quintana.
Nairo Quintana's opted to wear a conventional helmet now. It's not a time trial helmet, is it?
Well, it is, but it's just
closed. It's a closed helmet. But
exactly. It's just because of this position. You see the way he puts his head down a lot and moves his head around. It's better to have a smaller helmet, reduce the surface area.
It's Chris Froome.
So we don't have his time check at the moment.
Frustratingly, no, we don't. There we go. 9 seconds slower than Tony Martin. So way off the pace of Geraint Thomas at the moment, but up on the pace of all the other GC contenders, I would suggest, at this point.
Yeah.
So he's going well.
He's 6 seconds off Geraint Thomas, because Geraint Thomas was 3 seconds down at that. Actually, it's 4 seconds down Geraint Thomas at a time check. So he's only 5 seconds behind Geraint. So you can see that he is riding the negative split. Well, we'll see. He has to accelerate to make it a negative split. But at the moment, then, the biggest threat to Geraint Thomas is Stefan Küng.
Well, maybe Chris Froome, as he gets his information fed into his earpiece, will start to think less and less about the possibility of stage victory and more about just riding out his advantage and hurting. He's got all the GC rivals in terms of their timings at the moment behind him, and he is riding to pole position amongst the big GC favourites if you take out Geraint Thomas from that scenario, which is an interesting debate perhaps for another day. Meanwhile, let's look at Fabio Aru with 215 metres to go, and he belongs in that category of riders much like Bardet and Quintana and Simon Yates, you would have thought in paper, who will just be trying to limit their losses here. And he's
there he is, there's Küng coming in.
And he's going to finish in, 16:57, and here comes Stefan Küng, and what is his time? Let's look at the arch. When it crosses 16:04 is his target. Is he going to deny Geraint Thomas on the line? Stefan Küng, the Swiss rider, stops the clock as it pans up in 16:09, 5 seconds slower than Geraint Thomas, and that is another big rival for the Welshman dispensed with. And this victory, this unlikely sounding looking victory from Geraint Thomas, who was on no one's radar before today, is looking ever more likely, and boy does he know it.
See the relief. I know what it's like sitting in that position. You're just kind of trying to hold back all the emotions, trying not to show anything, and it is that. You almost strip yourself of the joy when it does happen, because you're preparing yourself to get beaten at each rider coming in.
Well, it is only Chris Froome now, I think we can say, who's going to deny Geraint Thomas, and even that is looking a little bit unlikely. He was slower than Geraint Thomas through the checkpoint, so he'll have to produce something extraordinary to get the better of Geraint Thomas and deny him stage 1 victory in the yellow jersey. The yellow jersey on the Tour de France. Here's Chris Froome.
Well, whatever happens, Team Sky are doing an incredible performance. They're just dominating the top 10 here. Before Chris Froome's even come in, they've got 3 riders in the top 5: Geraint Thomas, Kirienka, Kwiatkowski. So it's a dominant performance by Team Sky.
It's stunning, really. It is stunning. Richie Porte, their former domestique, and Chris Froome's mountain lieutenant, now riding for BMC and threatening Chris Froome for the general classification very seriously. Suggested they were somewhat weaker than in previous years. Well, on current evidence, the opposite seems to be true. Alberto Contador, meanwhile, is posting a good time, a very respectable time. It's not quite up there with the very best of them, but it's going to be in the mix. He's going to be around about 16:55-ish, or the time of Pinot and Bardet, in that kind of hunt. So they're not losing any substantial amounts of time to each other. Remember, Richie Porte came over in 16:51. So Porte versus Contador, if you put it like that, about 6 seconds between Porte and Contador on the line. He might be a bit disappointed with that 65th place. Actually, I'll correct myself. He probably will be disappointed with that.
I think so, but if you look at the big picture, he's in there with all the GC climbers. All those climbers their biggest concern will not to be losing time to each other, because they can then battle it out once they get onto their preferred terrain.
Well, Quintana, 16:25 from here. You'd have thought he'd be close to 17 minutes and probably around about the time of Bardet and Contador when he hits the finish line, and that'll be all right for him. Certainly, you know, in the shake-up between Contador and Quintana to isolate two riders, or Contador, Quintana and Froome, they all seem to be there or thereabouts. 16:40, 200 metres to go. It's going to be close to 17 minutes by the time he actually stops the clock, but it's a decent ride. He's got round safely, and in fact, he's probably scored a moral victory over one or two there, stopping the clock faster than Pinot or Bardet, or indeed Contador in 51st place, marginally better than some of his other rivals. Here comes the French national team trial champion, Pierre Latour. First glimpse of him, and a good time from him as well. Not going to be faster than Geraint Thomas, but he's ridden a very, very good second half. Didn't feature in the check times, and he's really attacked the second half of this course. Pierre Latour, who's something of a revelation now on the French cycling scene. The rider from AG2R La Mondiale, a potential GC rider, perhaps with ambitions of the top 10, in support of Romain Bardet. He stops the clock in 16:29, and that's an excellent ride from him in provisional 16th place from the French national TT champion. Here comes Chris Froome, though. He is closing in. He's the last rider on the road, the number one, the defending champion. He has his teammate on the hot seat, and he is eyeing up the time of Geraint Thomas, but David Miller is going to pull up short here.
He is, that's it. Looks like Geraint Thomas is going to be in yellow, and it's a great ride by Chris Froome. He's dominated all the GC riders, but it's his teammate who's going to get it.
Well, Geraint Thomas went, didn't he, to the Giro d'Italia, hunting down victory. That all went wrong for him, but there's some recompense here, because Geraint Thomas is going to take stage one of the Tour de France, and he's going to be the maillot jaune. Will this man, though, be in the yellow jersey at the end of 3 weeks? Chris Froome has laid down a big marker, and in terms of the big GC favourites, he is in pole position. 4th place for him on stage one for Chris Froome, but the win goes to his teammate, his friend, his domestique, his lieutenant, the Welshman, Geraint Thomas, the ride of his life.
Look at that, all the pent-up emotion finally comes out. Just you do really just wait until you see the clock, you see the official result, that you can actually let it go.
Marco Jallo, the Sky Soigneur, looked like he wasn't going to let go for a moment. The pair of them in delighted disbelief after what we deduced was a great ride, because this is about as much as we saw of it. Here's the first stage result of the 2017 Tour then, with a rider nobody picked or even really talked about at the top of it. Stefan Kung got closest of the riders who came after Geraint Thomas. Vasil Kirienka, the long-time leader, was third, a second ahead of the home favourite Tony Martin. Chris Froome was at 12 seconds. Michał Kwiatkowski made it an astonishing 4 Sky riders in the top 10. Marcel Kittel was top sprinter. So, Geraint Thomas's first Tour de France stage win in a Tour he wasn't even supposed to be riding, having been team leader for the Giro until he crashed out. Now, as always on day one, the GC is the same as the stage result, so let's look at the gaps between the favourites instead. Chris Froome was the best placed of them at 12 seconds, 25 seconds ahead of the next nearest contender, who surprisingly was Simon Yates. Richie Porte lost 35 seconds to Froome, 47 to Thomas, with Nairo Quintana only a second behind him. Esteban Chavez had the worst day of the big names, losing just over a minute to Froome, 1:13 to the stage winner and race leader. The first Welshman, in fact, we believe, ever to wear the yellow jersey, and he's good for a quote, come rain, shine or crashes, Geraint Thomas. Matt Rendell was behind the podium to see what he made of this.
Geraint, what does it feel like signing the yellow jerseys and sitting there wearing the thing?
Well, it's stuff you watch on TV, isn't it? It's incredible to be sat here doing it, and yeah, Paris isn't far away from Dusseldorf, is it? So maybe we just go straight there now and finish.
Maybe we can opt out, just the Brits, of course.
Yeah, there's no point going south. Let's just go directly to Paris. But it's incredible. I still don't know what to say. It's just it's a dream.
I haven't seen you like this before. You look shell-shocked. You seem to be coming round a bit now, but you look shell-shocked. How did it feel standing up there and putting on this historic jersey and joining the list of the greats?
It's amazing. It's just to get the win in itself, a stage of the Tour, and then the bonus of the yellow is incredible. And well, yeah, just to stand on there, you know, I've watched the Tour since I was 10, and I'm getting on now, so it's a long time ago. And yeah, to be the one there taking the jersey, and yeah, it's stuff of dreams.
especially since Geraint Thomas knows what it's like to suffer the opposite, the pain of crashing out, although not on the first day like Alejandro Valverde, who broke his kneecap in this collision with the barriers.